Welcome to episode 35 of Project 250, a weekly chronicle of the people, places, and events of the American Revolution in the order they occurred. So, without further ado, here's what was happening 250 years ago this week, August 21st to 27th, 1776. As the week began, as a terrible storm, lasting more than 3 hours, raged over New York City, George Washington wrote to the President of Congress, John Hancock, reporting that he had nothing special to communicate. It was no small irony that the war began in earnest the following day, August 22nd, when British and Hessian forces on Staten Island started crossing to Long Island, launching their attack on the city. The British forces, totaling about 4,000 troops, were commanded by Generals Clinton and Cornwallis and supported by the frigates Phoenix, Rose, and Greyhound, as well as 2 additional support vessels. They began to cross at roughly 5 a.m. and landed at Gravesend Bay around 8 a.m. By noon, between 13,000 and 15,000 troops, along with the ever-present camp followers, had landed largely without incident and with virtually no American opposition. In fact, crowds of loyalists turned out to welcome the British liberators. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, General Washington, convinced the landing was a feint and that Manhattan was the real target, dispatched only 1,500 troops to Brooklyn, bringing the total American strength to about 6,000 troops. The following day, August 23rd, there was brisk skirmishing at Flatbush Pass and Bedford Pass as British and Hessian forces probed American defenses. Skirmishing continued on August 24th, with few casualties on either side. On that same day, General Washington replaced General John Sullivan as commander of the American forces on Long Island with General Israel Putnam. Despite having more experience, Putnam ultimately proved to be a poor choice due to his unfamiliarity with the terrain. On August 25th, British reinforcements arrived, consisting of 2 brigades of Hessian grenadiers. On August 26th, events accelerated as General Washington returned to Brooklyn to confer with officers and inspect the lines of defense. At 9 p.m. that evening, the British Army, consisting of about 20,000 men, set their plans into motion. On the right, General Clinton's Light Infantry Brigade led the way, followed by Cornwallis with 8 infantry battalions and artillery. General Howe and General Hugh Percy brought up the rear with 6 infantry battalions and artillery in the baggage train. Guided by local loyalists, the British headed northeast from Flatlands toward Jamaica Pass, targeting the exposed left flank of the American lines. The Battle of Long Island, also called the Battle of Brooklyn, began early on the morning of August 27, 1776, when a group of British soldiers fired on American pickets near the Red Lion Tavern in Brooklyn. The British plan was simple yet elegant. On the left, British troops under General James Grant, along with von Heister's Hessians in the center, would launch diversionary attacks to hold the Americans in place. Grant would engage with American units under General Sterling and Colonel Attlee on the left flank, while von Heister's Hessians struck General Sullivan's troops near Flatbush Pass. Meanwhile, the main body, under Howe, Clinton, Cornwallis, and Percy, would strike from the region of Jamaica Pass. General Putnam, the American commander on site, having foolishly left his left flank dangerously exposed. The British flanking force, 10,000 strong, poured through Jamaica Pass towards the exposed American flank and rear. By 9 a.m., American troops under General Sullivan, stationed at Battle Pass, near the center of the American line, were completely caught off guard. Little suspecting that their flank had been turned, they suddenly found themselves under assault from 3 sides and in danger of encirclement. Panicked, they fled in terror. Ironically, up until now, many of Sullivan's troops near Battle Pass had mistakenly believed they were winning the battle, since the British appeared to be making little headway. At the center of the American line, near Gowanus Creek, 400 men from the 1st Maryland, known thereafter as the Maryland 400, fought tenaciously. They engaged in a series of near-suicidal attacks against 2,000 British and Hessian troops at the Old Stone House, also known as the Vecht Cortelyou House, to buy time for the rest of the American left wing to reach safety at Brooklyn Heights. The Marylanders, unwilling to surrender to the British, actually forced their way through enemy lines in order to surrender to the Hessians. Out of the original 400, fewer than a dozen finally made it back to the American lines at Brooklyn Heights. Washington, watching from Cobble Hill, was heard to remark, "Good God, what brave fellows I must this day lose." Meanwhile, on the American right, General Sterling's men offered stiff resistance, holding off the British for about 4 hours, but ultimately they were forced to give way to Grant's forces. Eventually, both the American left and center collapsed in disorder. There were later claims that surrendering American troops were bayoneted by the Hessians. When General Sullivan realized he was about to be surrounded by the main British force coming through Jamaica Pass, he ordered his men to retreat. Most of his command managed to get away, but Sullivan himself was captured along with one of his brigade commanders, Lord Stirling. By nightfall, the American survivors had retreated to the relative safety of Brooklyn Heights, with the British and Hessians closely pursuing them. It was at this point that fate, or random chance, took a hand. For reasons that continue to spark debate, General Howe halted the attack and ordered the troops to dig in, despite vigorous protest from many of his officers. Some scholars speculate that Howe believed the Americans on Brooklyn Heights were trapped, being confronted by superior numbers in front and with the East River to their backs. Others argue that Howe, wishing to avoid another costly frontal assault, like Bunker Hill, hoped that Washington would realize the hopelessness of his position and surrender. Or perhaps Howe believed that some form of reconciliation was still possible. Whatever the reason, and it may have been a combination of all three, judged by any objective measure, aside from a few incidents of personal valor, the day had been an utter catastrophe for the Americans, in which Washington and the Continental Army were outfought and outgeneraled at nearly every turn. American losses were estimated at between 300 to 400 killed and wounded, with 700 to 1,200 taken prisoner. By contrast, Howe claimed 367 total losses for the British. At the time, there seemed to be little cause for hope or optimism, and in retrospect, Howe's assessment that the Americans were beaten seems fully justified. What happened next would be nothing short of a miracle. And that's the way it was 250 years ago this week. If you like this video, please tell a friend. And if you like what you see on this channel, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.